Change is inevitable, but trust isn't. In today's world of constant uncertainty, how do leaders help people stay grounded, connected, and hopeful? Today's conversation explores the everyday behaviors that make that possible. Welcome to Behaviorally Speaking Leadership for Changemakers. I'm your host, Dr. Bubb, and today I'm joined by Lauren Higgins, a communications, content, and corporate marketing leader with more than 2 decades of experience helping mission-driven organizations communicate change in ways that build trust and inspire action. Let's join our conversation on leadership during uncertainty, why trust changes everything. Lauren, good morning. It's such a pleasure to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for being here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing terrific. Thank you for having me. Such an honor and pleasure.
Wonderful, wonderful. I'm looking forward to our conversation and what I'm going to learn from you today. So let's get it started off with just talking about leadership, right, and the nature of change. So, Lauren, when you think about leadership today, right, I know you have a wealth of experience. What qualities, in your opinion, are most essential for creating change that's meaningful but also lasting?
Such a great question to lead off with, Esther. I think I want to take a step back, though, before answering your question and just acknowledge where we are right now.
Yeah.
Because I think this notion of lasting change is difficult right now. And in some respects, It may not be necessarily realistic, lasting change, right? Because whether it's policy changes or organizational changes or changes to the way we drive to work, everything is subject to rethinking and retooling. Like, how can we do it better?
Yeah, I love that, Lauren.
And that's not necessarily always a bad thing, that we're always looking at how to make things better, except for the fact that people don't always deal well with change, right? Like I think of myself as being someone who's fairly adaptable. Constant change wears you down, right?
True. Yeah.
And though I'm not in a leadership position currently, I've talked to a lot of people, past and present leaders, say that leading right now is exceptionally hard, particularly throughout all of this change, right?
Yeah.
Because it's a constant churn. They're adapting, they're constantly adapting to the new circumstances. They're building new strategies. Then they need to communicate it to their people. And that's exhausting to be constantly going through that cycle, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So as I think about your question, sorry, long lead up, but I'll wind
That's
up.
Okay.
But I think the qualities that are most necessary for leaders are empathy and honesty, right? Stand shoulder to shoulder with your people. Acknowledge a change is hard, but treat them like adults. Be candid and be honest about the fact that the change isn't likely to stop, but that when you have a shared purpose, that's going to be the thing that remains unchanged. And when you find that stable ground together as a team, it will make organizations and departments and groups stronger.
Yeah. Lauren, you raised a lot of good points there. You talked about adaptability, you talked about honesty, and you talked about, just being able to meet people where they are. And you also talked about empathy. So I'm wondering, Lauren, and those are values that are important to me too. Have there been any of your experiences that shaped, right, your views on leadership and transformation?
So in my experience, in every professional transformation that I've been through, they're all hard in their own ways, but right now feels really different, right? And I think a lot of that has to do with AI.
Yes.
For people like me who has a background in communication and creative, it feels hard because it's almost existential, right? Like in the past, change has always been structural or strategy shifts, but now it's falling into question by purpose. And in the case of whether you're writing or you're coding or you're designing or you're storytelling, like all of this can be done faster and cheaper by a computer. And so that's like a different kind of uncomfortable entirely. So sitting with that sort of uncomfortable feeling has taught me something about leadership that I never fully understood before. When change does feel that kind of existential, when it threatens your role,
Yeah.
It's also threatening sort of your sense of purpose and value. But the one thing that helps you stay steady in those environments is that human connection, right? When a leader sees you and a colleague gets you, or it's just like a conversation that just reminds you that your experience, your judgment, and your humanity matters a lot. I'm not trying to say that what we're going through right now is all bad, right? There's a lot of good things that are coming out of all these the technological changes, the AI and whatnot. But I think the most important thing leaders can do is create a space where humanity and technology can work together in a symbiotic kind of way.
I love that. That was a nice summary of that, humanity and technology. And, Lauren, I think it takes some level of humility to acknowledge that, right? Because you talked about connections, right? And we have to be humble enough to get off the pedestal and connect with people, meet them where they are, right? Show up on the floor. So in your opinion, Lauren, what role do you believe humility plays in helping leaders grow, right? And then adapt over time?
Sure. It's enormous. Humility, I think, is the one thing I think that helps people feel as though they have a connection to their leadership, right? Because I think in those circumstances, when leaders can share what they know, but acknowledge that they don't have all the answers, it means that you still have a purpose to be able to say, have we thought about this? And it opens people up to be able to share, because you have a leader who is humble enough to be able to say, I don't have all the answers. I want to hear from you. And I think then when people can see that their perspective matters, is valuable, that earns trust. And quite honestly, I've had a couple of leaders, in fact, two I can think of off the top of my head, who did go into leadership, being very, very humble. And they valued my point of view. We didn't always agree, but they valued my point of view, and they appreciated the fact that I was willing to share it. And I would honestly walk through fire for those people.
Yeah, I love that. And you talked about appreciating that you were willing to share it. And it made me also think, Lauren, about when people come to us to share mistakes, right? So that's one thing I've realized, being transparent about sharing your mistakes. It also opens up that door too. It gives shows that level of humility on your part. But the openness to be able to understand and accept and not necessarily blame or judge, but all right, thank you for telling me, where can we go from here, right? So I think that was a good addition to our conversation. And in saying all of that, I think the culture of the organizations, our own cultures too, right, Lauren, sort of impacts how we lead, how we think, how we see things, right? So let's talk a little bit about how we can build systems that support success, and how, in your opinion, do organizational systems and cultures, right, influence the way leaders behave and make decisions?
Yeah, culture is so important, but it's a tough word right now, right?
Yeah.
A lot of organizations are really struggling, particularly those who are built on mission. And let me sort of get into that a little bit. So whether it's a nonprofit or a for-profit organization that has a really strong sense of mission, it's usually, based on this idea that we can make a difference, we can make people's lives better, right?
Yeah.
But to do that, really, I mean, to deliver on your mission, there are obstacles in your way, right? Which is hard to overcome on a good day. Add to that changing government policies, rising costs, and AI. Suddenly these organizations are fighting battles on multiple fronts that may not even really matter to their original mission or purpose, right? Yeah. So these organizations are being forced to change, they're being forced to adapt, and sometimes can't see why or how that change aligns with the mission. And so suddenly people are confused, and that creates anxiety, that creates stress, and they talk about it with their colleagues, and suddenly the culture doesn't break, right?
Yeah.
So I think that, culture is something of a byproduct of the mission or purpose. People feel connected to a mission and it's why they come to work every day, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And that's when the culture is really strong and it's healthy. But when that connection breaks down and people don't see why they're doing what they're doing anymore because we're getting distracted by all the other things that we're trying to deal with in this sort of tumultuous time.
Yeah.
It almost feels like what they're trying to do is they're disconnected from why they're there, right?
Yeah.
And not understanding the why is hard. And so if there's not people there having honest conversations about why everything is happening, then suddenly the culture is going to be the ones that suffer. So to answer your question, when leaders can make the connection explicit between what's happening and why, and communicate it really clearly, especially when times are hard, I think that's when the culture can remain intact. But without having those kind of honest conversations, I think the culture is going to start to suffer.
Yeah.
I'll give you a really quick tangent. I was thinking about this question a bit before we sat down together, and I think about it in my home, in our family, right?
Okay.
So we have 2 kids, 18 and 15, and the older one, as you know, is very he's very self-directed in a positive way, runs his own business, doesn't really rely on us for much help. And he's pretty independent, right? And I take that for granted. Sometimes I'll be really honest with you that I assume that he can pretty much handle anything. And that's a little bit of this is kind of a fail, right? This is kind of an example of like a failure that could happen at work too, right? Where you assume your people can handle anything. Mm-hmm. So when I don't communicate something to my oldest, like a family change, he gets really frustrated with me, right? Yeah. Not unlike perhaps what happens at work, right? And I'll give you an example. When my mother-in-law, my mother-in-law had dementia, and she was experiencing some of the later stages of dementia and were getting worse. We didn't tell the children right away. Because we weren't quite sure how to, and we were, there's still a lot of information coming in, and we held back a bit. And then one night at dinner, we're sitting there talking, and I just not inadvertently, but it came out. I said, well, Mama may not be here for much longer. And it really was a moment where I could see my oldest face, just his brows furrow, his face change. Yeah. And he was like, wait, what? Like, wait, how long have you known this? He was really frustrated. And he was right to be frustrated, right? Yeah. We didn't know exactly what to say, but holding back that information didn't help either. Right. And later on, my oldest and I sat down, and I'm going to paraphrase a bit here about what he said to me, but this is the gist of it. Like, I trust you as my parent to be honest with me. And when you're not, I feel like I don't matter. And, admittedly, like, our kids don't need to know every single detail when they happen. But when we do know important information, even if we can't share every detail, we owe it to them to be honest and let them know that we care enough to share the information that we know because they matter, if nothing else, right? So, and I bring this back to a professional setting because I think the same holds true. Yeah. Leaders need to share information where they can. And it goes back to the humility point. Like, I may not be able to share everything with you because I may not know all the answers quite yet, but being honest with them, I think is important. It's particularly, I know right now in corporate environments, at least, work has become a bit transactional where, okay, I'm coming to work. I'm going to do my job. You're paying me. That to me is the trade-off, right? Yeah. And people are saying that they don't care whether, they don't care whether they're being treated like a person. They're going in to do a job and they're leaving and that's it. But I will say that the people who feel invested in missions of their purpose and their why at work bring them their whole humanity to work, and they deserve to be treated like humans. It's not just a transaction. and being honest with them is just a small price to pay to keep that really dedicated talent.
Yeah.
That's a lot of words. I apologize.
No,
that was too much.
Not too much at all. It was such a powerful story because my big takeaway was, you're my parents. I trust you. And if you're not honest with me, I feel like I don't matter. That was such a powerful story, and, everything you said. And so in some respects, it could lead to loss of trust, right? Loss of rupture in relationships, or then he might not be willing to change or do whatever it is you're presenting to him, right? So then there might be some resistance, and it makes me think of this, is such a good analogy and such a good story, Lauren, for talking about this in terms of leadership and in the professional setting or wherever we lead, right? But how then do we support people who are then resistant to change, regardless of whether it was we weren't honest with them or it's something new, right? Because, and then also too, I'm thinking as you're saying this, to accept how we may have contributed, Lauren, to their resistance to change. How do we work through that?
It's a big, that's a big question. So I'm going to use an example of when my team leader had to share some pretty significant news about change with us. We were undergoing a change in reporting structure that was pretty drastically different from the situation we'd been in before.
Yeah.
And she knew it wasn't going to make any of us happy. She knew right away. And struck me in that moment about her, said she was so calm, right? And I couldn't figure out how she got that way. I saw that, a little bit of me inside was panicking as I turned over this news in my head. And I still wonder, like, how could she deliver this information to us so evenly? And she'd only learned about it like maybe an hour or so before us. So she asked us if we had questions. And I said, how are you doing with all of this? You seem really calm.
Yeah.
And she laughed and she said, years of therapy. and but she meant it. She really did, because she had done the internal work. That gave her the tools and the ability to be able to take in this news, process it herself, and, then, focus on her team.
Yeah.
So that moment taught me a lot of things. That honesty goes a long way. Our leader was honest with us about the change. She went about processing it. But it also demonstrated to me about mindset. Good leaders, I think, have done the work to know exactly what they believe and they value, and they let those beliefs and values guide all of their decisions, right? It's that centering thing. It's almost like they've internalized the mission, they've internalized their purpose. And so in this situation, she knew that being honest with us about the change was the most respectful and dignified thing she could do. And through that, gave us all a chance to process it. And at the same time, going back to the whole humility point, there were parts of the conversation or questions that she couldn't answer for us. And she said, I don't know. But she also went on to say, we're going to figure this out together. So it was that moment of, I'm bringing you in together. I care about you enough to bring you in on this and share with you what I know. And we're going to figure out the rest together. And I think when leaders do that and you bring people together, they feel like, okay, I'm not alone, even though I am coping with a lot of emotions around change. Yeah.
You shared a lot in that, but a lot of what I pulled up from what you said, you really talked about values, right? And holding true to them. And, I think, if we know what our values are and we stay true to them, regardless of whether it's a change we're in agreement with or we understand or it's new, it's just thrown in our plate, it really helps. So saying all of that to say, I learn a lot. Lauren, I will admit from my experience, good, bad, ugly, and different, right? Missteps, victories, things like that. But I think at the crux of it for me, Lauren, is knowing what my values are and holding true to them and how that impacts my experience. So from your corporate experience, Lauren, let's talk a little bit about lessons from experiences here. What leadership behaviors have you seen produce the strongest teams and the best outcomes?
So I think it goes back to the mindset. piece of it, right? Because when all that internal work has been done, it frees people up to lead in somewhat of a natural way that's genuine because they know their why, right?
Yeah.
So I think there are three things that produce the best teams, the best outcomes. And it's those people who can transition between confidence, humility, and uncertainty with ease, right? Like they know what their role is and why it matters to them. And they can take the big picture and bring it into perspective for their people. This change is happening because we didn't hit our goals or because we have to cut costs, right? What does that mean for our projects? I can't tell you right now, but this is as much as I know. And I'm going to raise your concerns and I'm going to bring it back to the team, right? So confidently share what they know, humility to acknowledge that they don't have all the answers, and then say, but I'm going to do something. I'm going to take that information back and I'm going to try to get us some answers. Yeah. I also think that leaders who have the strongest teams also ask a lot of questions. They don't make assumptions. They don't make it performative. They ask questions so that they can really hear from their people, like the voice of the people, so to speak, right? Yeah. And it's because they are genuinely curious, because they would like to know more information to bring back to the bigger conversation and say, this is what I'm hearing from my people. And often in doing that, they not only start to find clarity and maybe answers to some of the questions that they're hearing from above, and they can bring that back, but it's also an opportunity to make sure they're hearing their people and their people feel valued, going back to what we were talking about earlier. Yeah, yeah. And I also think the third piece of really great leaders who have really strong teams is that the leaders themselves are courageous. So it goes back to the humility, it goes back to the curiosity, but you have to stand up for what you believe in and not be afraid. And that's hard right now everywhere, right? Because you worry, you're like, am I the only one thinking this? But again, it goes back to those leaders who know their why and know this is why I'm doing all of this. They're willing to go into the room and just challenge ideas in a respectful manner, not in I know better than you, but to say, that doesn't jive with what I'm hearing. And that kind of advocacy, when people on your team see that you're going in there and you're challenging because something doesn't fit with the way you can see, there's something that's not connecting, there's a dissonance there. Your team feels like, my leader's going to bat for me. I know that they have my back. I know they're listening. I know they're trying to fix the things that aren't working.
Yeah. That's such a rich response. You talked about honesty, you talked about curiosity, and you talked about advocacy, like speaking up, right? And being courageous, actually, is the word you used. And it reminds me, Lauren, of all of those values being exhibited. So, we met years ago when I was assigned to your son's, team, education team, and we've remained in communication. But I have to say, I'm curious as to your parent perspective here, because from my perspective, it was a lot of, Lauren, I didn't know everything, right? But being honest enough to say, all right, I don't know, but I can go to my supervisor or my BCB and ask questions, things like that. Asking the questions that we needed to ask. But I see you, Lauren, as a parent throughout the process that was courageous to speak up, to advocate for your children, right? Because again, I always say the parent perspective is so critical. Am with your son for an hour, 2 hours, whatever. You're with him 24/7. So you know way more than I do. So as a parent navigating complex systems, education systems back in the day, still today, right? And the complex systems you're navigating now, what, in your opinion, a high functioning, mission aligned team, what does that look like for you?
Yeah. Such a great question. And by the way, thank you, because it's because of people like you and all that you brought to our family that our kids are on a really strong path ahead, and all brought your sense of purpose and mission to your work. I mean, to a T, we had no members of our 2 IEP teams, our 2 children's IEPs. Yes. But I will say that there is no one size fits all. With, how people approach their child's IEP journeys, educational journeys, right? You know, both kids, as you know, didn't meet developmental milestones as you know, young children, really young, like under 3, because I think we met through the IU, and they subsequently have received diagnosis. But for me, the thing that really helped make our team function well is that we had a goal. We all shared a goal, and in particular that with our oldest, the first time ever dealing with an IEP and dealing with all the developmental delays and all of that. We had a goal that I wanted him to be in a typical kindergarten. I wanted inclusion was important. Okay. And having that goal on the horizon for us made it clear for us to see the road ahead. Mm-hmm. So we were dealing with, as you know, dealt with all kinds of therapists, from behavior to speech to OT, specialized classrooms in preschool. A lot of different players, a lot of different agencies. They all didn't always talk to one another. And of course, we had the IEP meetings, and people shared their all the specialists shared their notes. But I felt like we had these moments too, where our OT and our speech therapist would come together on the same day. And we would, the 4 of us, would sit down on the floor together and I'm the 4th being my son. We would all be working together, the OT on their stuff, the speech therapist on this stuff, but we would blend it. And because we could all work together, we could collaborate on ideas, and you know, I got to learn alongside them. So again, it goes back to humility. I didn't know any of this stuff, not a lick, but they brought their expertise to me. I brought to them what I saw from my own experience, and worked together. But I set goals in my head, and I communicated those to the team, and we worked together toward them. It got a little more challenging once we got to elementary school, because obviously I'm not. Not a lot of therapy was happening. In the home or whatnot, but so the school was in charge of the programming, but I still set the goals, right? And I think that having clear goals is what made the team work so well together, because we all knew where we were heading. Even though there were obviously steps along the way, we all knew the direction that we were heading, and we had honest conversations when the goals didn't feel right, and we adapted the goals. And I think having that common ground is what helped us keep moving forward and accomplishing them. And for the oldest kid, who didn't speak until after 3, now live streamer, tells you that we met some of those goals pretty well. Yes.
Absolutely. And again, very proud of you. And again, just a good example, a good story of, what it means to be involved, what it means, to know. And to your point, right? You talked about, you had a vision, you had a goal, and, our vision in life is our greatest asset, right? Because once we know where we're going, we're more likely to get there. And then it became for you, Lauren, the shared vision. So everyone on the team, including me, knew what your vision was for your kids and your family. And we all shared that vision with you. We shared that goal. We gave input. We met. We collaborated. We talked, right? And so I believe that helps you, your family, and us stay on track, and even your kids today, right? Still staying on track with your vision for them, and now, as their vision for themselves. But at times, Lauren, we may drift away from that purpose, right? So what is it that you did? I can ask it 2 ways, that allowed you and your family to stay on track, or what is it that teams might do or not do that causes drift, from the vision and the goal and the purpose?
I'm going to answer both, if that's okay.
Okay, sure.
I think when it comes to our children, and where there were times that we drifted, I think a couple things. I think where maybe I think it's natural as a parent to sometimes take responsibility and blame yourself, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I do wonder if there were times when I saw things drifting, and I thought to myself, maybe I should have done more to be more involved.
Yeah.
Maybe I did, especially when it came to when the kids were in elementary school, and suddenly it was really it was incumbent on the school to handle most of their IEPs. And I did have to step back a little bit. You just have to. You can't be in their business, because honestly, like, I did trust them, but there were times when there were, especially with our younger son in elementary school, but there were moments where I saw we are not heading toward the path that we all talked about, because there were definite incidents that were big setbacks behaviorally. That was hard. It's really hard and emotionally draining. And I think that in those situations, like, you know, I was 10 or 15 years ago, I wasn't really good at self-care. I really didn't buy into it then. I should have more. But when I did give myself a chance to take a beat and not be so self-critical, I think that's when I was able to refocus on, okay, we've had this setback. How can we figure out, how do we get back on track towards reaching this goal? And and really to take the emotion out of it, because I was really emotional in those situations. And I think in those circumstances that contributed to the drift. So when I was able to stop being so emotional about it and refocus on what are we trying to accomplish and what is our mission, what is our purpose, then that helped us get back on track.
Yeah. Thank you for that response. It was really rich. And one word that I pulled out, several words, but I'll reflect on this one, is reflection, right? So you talked about that you reflected in the moment. You talked about, you know, you didn't give a lot of credit to self-care, but you do more now. And you took moments to step away and think, right, when you realized that your teams might have been drifting, or your students' teams might have been drifting. And so I see that as one of the tools that could be used to help get teams back on track to the shared vision, the shared mission, the shared goal. Is there anything else you would share that you would say can help teams, you know, realign, get back on track, other than reflection? You know, you also talked about humility. Is there anything else that you believe would help that process?
I think in corporate environments and even probably nonprofits that are dealing with drift, it's usually a function of big changes like layoffs or loss of talent. Maybe somebody left their job that was the glue to it all, right?
Yeah.
But in both of those circumstances, the subsequent drift that happens, right? It's usually, it manifests itself in the same way. People panic a bit because they're trying to figure out, how do we close these gaps that have emerged as a result of the loss of talent in one way or another, and how do we get things done, right? So they start to focus on closing the gap, stopping the leaky bucket, but they lose track of what they're supposed to be doing in the bigger picture. They're just trying to cope with the loss. And I think when we give people the space to brainstorm and talk through, okay, how can we together as a group figure out how to close these gaps and just process it as a team, I think that's a way that it's like reflection, but on a different way, where you're not doing it alone as much, but you're doing it as a team and bringing people together to problem solve and not trying to figure it out on your own. So I would say bringing people together. I think a common theme you'll find with me is that I much rather bring people together than be alone and trying to figure some of this out, especially when it comes to these big changes that don't always feel good, that lend themselves to the drift.
Lauren, thank you for sharing that. You know, you talked a lot about the reflection, but you talked about it as shared, right? And so it's a strength of yours really bringing your teams together to have those conversations. Okay, so here's our shared vision, but let's talk together about what's happening and how we can move forward. So in thinking about leadership today, in thinking about leadership of the past, but segueing now to the future, if you could redefine leadership, what should it look like today? What would you want leaders to prioritize differently in their day-to-day operations?
I hesitate to redefine leadership because doing so in a vacuum, I think, is a little bit unfair, honestly.
Okay.
But that being said, I don't know if we need to redefine leadership as much as perhaps going back to some of the basics.
Yeah.
I think back, and I've had conversations with people recently about this notion about 5 or 6 years ago, this idea of servant leadership, right? Where you were in service to not yourself, but to the greater purpose, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think we've lost that in recent years. And there are people, though, that still are in service of it, do embrace those tendencies, but they don't talk about it nearly as much because it's not as popular. But those people that do bring forward that I'm doing this for the sake of the purpose, the goal, the mission, they may not talk about it, but they live it and they act it. Those are the people that I think are ones that we should be looking toward as being the future of leadership, because I think we've gotten away from that. I think there's a lot of people out there, and we don't have to go into details, that perhaps may not be always in service of the greater good, but are doing it for their own gain. And I think to the extent that we can get back to leadership that is trying to make the world a better place, in whether that's in nonprofits or in the for-profit environment, where even you can make money and still do good. And I think that those who can accomplish both and make lives better, I think that the people that we ought to be looking towards. So maybe not necessarily retooling leadership, is perhaps going back to some basics.
Yeah. I love that response. Sorry, going back to the basics, but I really love that you brought up servant leadership, because it's so important. It's so critical in our world today. And I think part of that too, Lauren, as you were talking about it, so whether it's servant leadership, for-profit, nonprofit, in our own community, in our homes, right? I think it's just the hustle and bustle and everything that's happening. And you talked earlier, Lauren, about, when staff resign or turnover, right? Then it's just like, all right, I need to find someone, I need to get someone, I need coverage, things like that. And so when all of those occurrences pull us away from the heart of what we should be doing, right? So then we lose sight of that role, our role as servants. But I appreciated that, because it's just a reminder of, regardless of what's happening, we still need to remember those that we're serving and those that we're leading. So close us out, right? You talked about going back to the basics. So let's talk about, what, in your opinion, would you give to our listeners, as we close out this conversation today? I like to call it a Monday morning move, right? A specific behavior, something that they can implement immediately to start creating change.
I want to answer this question by sharing a story of someone who I admire. It's actually a parent. And I look to her as a role model.
Okay.
Because I think some of what she does with her child's educational journey through their IEP and all of their care, therapists and providers, she's managing quite a team, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And one of the things that she told me she does at the beginning of every meeting with all of her child's care team is she starts off every meeting with, what is the why? Why are we here? And she talks about what her son has accomplished because of people in the room. She talks about what's next for him. And in doing so, everyone knows why they're there and why they matter.
Yeah.
And so I think that this is something that's quite simple that any of us could really do. And I actually came up because I was preparing an answer and thought about something like this. And I came up with this idea of, what's the Wi-Fi? It's a Wi-Fi check.
Yeah.
And I'm talking WHY, right?
Yeah.
The Wi-Fi in your house connects all of your devices with, in one central place, right?
Yeah.
The Wi-Fi on your teams should be about, why are we all here today? Yeah. What's gone well since we last met? What's not gone well? What do we need to do to keep moving forward towards our why, right?
Yeah.
And I think setting that expectation up front, need to be a therapy session, it should be only 5 minutes. You can go around the room and say, what's our why? And what's keeping us from delivering upon our why? And I think if we can do that Wi-Fi at the start of a meeting, doesn't have to be every meeting. That might be a little bit much and it might get old really fast. Yeah. But if there's certain really important meetings that you're having with your team, starting with a Wi-Fi might help you all get connected and forward together in a positive way, especially if your team is feeling like they're a little bit lost about what they're doing, what's going on. Yeah.
Lauren, I absolutely love that. You better go trademark that right now. What's the Wi-Fi? Like,
no, you can, that's all you. That's all you, Esther. You can have that.
But oh my goodness, what a good way to sum us up. And you're saying it, and I'm thinking of meetings, that I have, IEP or not, it doesn't really matter. Like it's so important, Lauren, to set the stage. Like, because I'm thinking, Lauren, we might be coming into the meeting with whatever is going on in our lives, like whatever battle we were just, dealing with. So to kind of just help people come together and focus on why we're here, it's just such a golden way to sum up this conversation. What's the Wi-Fi? I love it. I love it.
And I also think that in this world where we're constantly churning, to your point, right?
Yeah.
Bringing us back to, what's the point? Why are we here?
Yep.
It helps settle us and maybe helps tune out some of the stuff that feels distracting, overwhelming, icky.
Yes.
So we feel as though we have purpose because we all do.
Yeah. Yes. I'm doing that this week, Lauren. I have some meetings and I'm going to do it in one, and I'll report back. I'll report back to you off air.
Can't wait to hear.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Lauren. I'm so happy. I'm very blessed to have met you, to have crossed your path. I'll say that every day.
It's mutual. You know that.
Yes, I absolutely do. I've learned so much from you, and, you're really committed to your goals, to your mission, to your vision, to your purpose, but just really hearing people out and being very accepting, Lauren, and, the inclusivity and all of those things. I've never felt like an outsider, right? So I have to give you props for that, just welcoming, and seeing the best in people and seeing their potential, and just be willing to work with them, right? So, and your openness and your honesty, I just appreciate all of that. Yeah.
Well, the feeling is mutual and you bring so much. And I think our therapists, speech therapists, OTs, they go into those fields because not that they're easy, they are hard, but they know they make such a difference, and they've made an enormous difference in our families' lives. And we still can track all of the kids' progress back to the therapist. And I wish I could give all of them a shout out, but I'm afraid that if I did, I'd miss some and I'd feel horrible, but they know who they are and they are important and they've brought so much to our family, and even in the hard times.
Yeah.
So I think we, in all people in our lives, I think to the extent that we can focus on the value that they've brought to us, then that brings you joy much more so than focusing on the negative.
Yes. Wonderful. Well, Lauren, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Thank you. Thank you.
As we close today's conversation, I hope you're leaving with this reminder. Change doesn't begin with a new strategy, a new technology, or even a new organizational chart. It begins with people, and people are far more likely to embrace change when they feel seen, heard, valued, and connected to a purpose greater than themselves. Thank you to Lauren Higgins for sharing her experiences and insights on leading with humility, communicating with honesty, and building cultures where trust can thrive, even during times of uncertainty. Her perspective reminds us that leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about creating the conditions where people can learn, grow, and move forward together. If today's episode encouraged or challenged your thinking, I'd love for you to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with a colleague, a friend, a family member, or a fellow leader who is navigating change. Those small actions help us continue to reach change makers around the world. To learn more about my work, leadership coaching, professional development, behavior consulting, and resources designed to help leaders transform practice and people, visit EstherCBubbABAServices.com. And check out the companion blog, Behaviorally Speaking, Insights for Changemakers, at EstherCBubbABAServices.com/blog. Until next time, remember, leadership is behavior, and behavior always tells a story.